We're in the power stage, the first stage of shifting problems into power. And we've been examining lots of different ways to look at problems and getting you a better feel of the nature of what problems and their purpose in life are. And today I want to talk why it's so important to understand problems and really get in there, especially problems from our childhood. So I want to relay an experience from my childhood when I was in 5th grade. This story is really going to underscore the importance of dealing with problems from the past, especially childhood ones. Stories, they become part of our legacy, something that we pass down, our oral history. And the stories are not as important as the energy that they contain in each of our lives. Each of us probably have stories that empower us and other stories that disempower us. It's the stories that are built upon a problem that you haven't resolved in life that's creating these limiting beliefs in multiple areas of your life that I'm really going to talk about and concerned about in this training. They're like a virus. They keep replicating themselves over and over again in various areas of your life. So back to my story. I was a typical 5th grade boy, restless and full of energy. I didn't necessarily see the value in many of the things that I was being taught in school. I knew I had some gifts and talents, but I wasn't really applying myself. My 5th grade teacher was probably a good teacher, but he really wasn't a very nice person. He thought the way to motivate young boys was through humiliation and harassment. And maybe you relate to that from your childhood experience in school too. I hope not, but I've done enough coaching and talking with people that many people have had similar experiences to what I've had. And unfortunately, today was my day to be humiliated. Not that I needed a day to be humiliated. We just had a spelling test earlier in the morning, and that was certainly not one of my better subjects or a subject I applied myself to a lot. And my 5th grade teacher started to write misspelt words on the board. And then he put 6 words out of the 20 that had been on the test. And after he was finished writing the 6 misspelled words here, I started to hear some snickers and laughter throughout the classroom because I knew that somebody in the class had done that. And he looked at me and he said, "Michael, these are the 6 misspelled words from your spelling test today. So I just have one question for you. Are you just lazy or stupid?" All my classmates were looking at me. I was experiencing a public flogging of humiliation with my misspelt words on the board for everybody to see. This, of course, was not a question that I was going to answer. To be honest, I was quite shocked that he'd even asked that. "It's really quite a simple question, Michael. Are you lazy or just stupid?" he insisted. I'd seen him ridicule other students in the class before. I was not sure why he selected me today. I wasn't a hard worker, there's no doubt about that, but I wasn't a disruptive student or I wasn't rude at all. So it seemed unfair that he was targeting me. If I could have disappeared at that moment, I would have given anything to have done it right then and there. Then my teacher marched over to my desk, threw the spelling test down on my table and said, "Next week, you're going to redo this test and you're going to take next week's test, and it better be better than this." Young children, they really need to find a way to deal with problems like this. And public humiliation is certainly a problem that needs to be dealt with. Our brains create these synapses, these superhighways for situations like this, so that the next time I'm corrected or humiliated or even put on the spot, I'd know how to respond. My internal response was not to trust adults or authority figures, or really anybody who challenged me or criticized me, even if it was constructive criticism. So you can see that the superhighway was taking me to a place that was not ultimately going to be healthy. Now my fifth grade brain was trying to protect me so I wouldn't have to deal with the humiliation and hurt of being publicly humiliated. I understand it, but I generalized it into my adult life to practically everything. So I want to talk about this cause-effect cycle that we all go through when dealing with problems. So things would come up into my life, things like criticism. I'd have a job and I'd have a supervisor and they wouldn't say, "You're the worst employee I ever have. Are you stupid or lazy?" They wouldn't say that words for me. They would just criticize what I'm doing and suggest another way that I could do it better. And What did I hear? Are you stupid or lazy? From my 5th grade teacher. Or if somebody disapproved, if I felt like they were disapproving of what I was doing. Now, was it true that they were disapproving, or was it my interpretation of their disapproval? That's something that's sometimes hard for me to grasp, because I'm filtering it through a 10-year-old who's looking at the world very differently than an adult should be. And sometimes people they had suggestions for improvement. Hey, they really wanted to come alongside me and say, wow, we think this is great, but if you did this, it would even be that much better. And again, very easy for me to have this tunneled vision and say, that's just like the 6 misspelt words on the board. This is harassment. They don't think that I'm doing a good job. And that wasn't their intention at all. But again, I want you to see that problems have this very insidious way of getting into your life and starting to lie to you about everything. How about somebody that just has a helpful thought? That's what they just have, a helpful thought. Hey, I got a suggestion for you. It's a way that you could do this better. And I thought that you would like that. Again, boy, lies, they're like that virus. They'll take over, and they'll take all of those different areas, and they'll start to affect that. And then this is kind of the ultimate one. Anything less than praise. You know what happens sometimes when these problems come into your life as a young child? I kind of went the other way. I wanted people just to give me praise, that I could do no wrong all the time, and that wasn't realistic situation for me at all. So I had reactions to this. I had to cause. These are the things that came into my life. You know what? And I wasn't going to be able to create a life that wasn't going to have some criticism and helpful thoughts and suggestions. Those are things that are going to happen. So I don't know what I thought the world was going to look like. So I had some reactions to those things. And the first thing that I would do right off the bat, I would discount what the people were saying. I wouldn't give it a lot of credit. I would just think, oh, these people are just being bullies, the whole theme again. And so that was not a positive thing. And of course, this is a typical one for a lot of people. I would get defensive. I would feel like, they didn't really care about me. And again, no truth in that, no truth at all. It was because this problem had so much negative catabolic energy, I projected that out to the world in all of these situations, and that's the reactions I was hearing. Another thing I would do, I'd pull out all the stops. I would find a way that I did not have to go where they wanted me to go. And I think where they were wanting me to go is saying, there's room for improvement, and I think maybe my 5th grade teacher is trying to say that to me too. He could have said it in a lot of different ways, but he was just letting me know, you're a smart guy, you need to start studying for these spelling tests. This is ridiculous for you to be missing these words. That's not what I heard. I looked at it as harassment, right? The other thing that I had as one of my reactions here was I had this pre-programmed, self-survival path that I was going to go to. And when you stop listening and you start reacting, which is another major thing that I would do, you instantly shut down and you can't hear what this person's saying, even though it's probably really fabulous advice they're giving you, good suggestions that would improve what you're doing. You just stop. You just stop listening, and you really you don't know where they were going with their suggestions because you're not giving them a chance. And so this cause and effect cycle, it's a really negative place to go into. It's like you're always getting caught into this dead end, and you keep going there over and over again. You keep hoping you're going to get a different result, and you don't. So I started to think about, what are the things that I'm missing out on? Because I do miss out on some things when I react as a 5th grader in an adult world, right? So one of the things I miss out on right away is great information. I've had the opportunity, probably just like you, to work with some really tremendous people that could guide and direct me in a certain path. And a lot of times I just missed out on that because I wasn't really listening to that potentially great information. I also had those people in my life that came along, they wanted to mentor and coach me to help me become better at what I was doing. Again, if you're a person that will not take feedback, it will not take suggestions, helpful suggestions, even criticism, and you become very defensive and push people away, then those people just are not going to want to mentor and coach you, and you're going to miss out on that wonderful opportunity. The other thing that I missed out on, I created this world, this illusionary world, where I was isolated in my world of doing no wrong. And that was a lonely place because I made mistakes all the time. I'm always looking for ways to improve now at my age, but back in my middle years, my adult years, I wanted to try to still protect myself. And so I missed out on a lot of that. And the other thing was my willingness to adapt and to change. That is probably the biggest thing that I missed out on dealing with problems this way, was not being willing to adapt and change enough so that I could grow. I think I slowed down my ability to prosper in some aspects of the businesses I grew and the clients that I worked with. So, not all people are going to be like my 5th grade teacher, and thank goodness for that. There's a lot of nurturing, caring people out there who still are giving you helpful suggestions. They're not trying to humiliate me. I know I don't have the right to have to be right all the time, or even most of the time. Is being right some of the time acceptable to me? Yeah, why? I don't find that I'm right 80% of the time. But if I'm willing to adapt and change in those situations, then I'm gain something for every experience. I gain 100% of the learning experience from it. My 5th grade spelling words really convinced me that I did need to be right all the time, and that just wasn't possible. So I wasn't in control of the problem. I let this problem control me. There's a tremendous amount of negative energy rotating around childhood problems, just like this one. If I didn't find a way to shift that negative energy, I would have spent my adult life being totally controlled by a problem when I was 10 years old. I think there's probably a lot of adults and adults that are successful in different areas of life that respond to challenges, conflicts, obstacles, and barricades in life with this negative emotional energy from their childhood. There came a day, though, in my life where I didn't want this situation to define who I was, because in truth, there was no correlation between the person I am today and that experience I had back when I was 10 years old. I'm 60 years old today. That's 50 years ago. I've created 4 different successful businesses. In the last 18 years, I've been the founder and CEO of an educational software company, when I've been able to work with hundreds of teachers and thousands of students who've utilized our software. I've gone on to publish articles and books, and thank goodness for spell check. Who would have known that computers were going to come along, and as long as I'm fairly close to the word I wanted, the computer will correct it for me. So I needed to diffuse and shift this catabolic energy from my past into a more positive, productive one. I really needed to revisit my 5th grade teacher who asked if I was lazy or stupid. It was a pretty emotionally charged question for a 5th grader. And looking back and ending up as an educator myself and teaching for a number of years, I could see his frustration in teaching a bunch of rambunctious 5th grade boys. We weren't taking class seriously and primarily came to school for recess. I definitely wasn't stupid, but the truth was, I think I was being lazy and I wasn't applying myself. And even though I don't believe that his approach was the appropriate one to motivate me or other 5th grade boys, I realize now that he probably saw some possibilities, some potential in me, and was frustrated that I wasn't applying myself or even trying. Of course, there's many other approaches he could have taken to get that across to me. But nevertheless, if I hadn't found a way to shift that emotional energy from that negative place when I was 10 years old to a positive one, I could have been resentful and bitter the rest of my life. Eventually, other teachers believed in me, saw my gifts and talents, and I went on to get my bachelor's and master's degree. I taught in the public school system for 10 years before starting my educational software company. You know, experiences from childhood are so intensely powerful that you have to deal with them. I'm thankful that one of the ways I dealt with this negative message in my early life was I did create this barricade around me, and I believed I could do anything. And I would go out and I would take risk in business that I might not have done if I hadn't had that experience in 5th grade. So I believed that this 5th grade teacher, in a roundabout way, created in me this sense of unstoppable determination that I'm talking about in this class. And I'm thankful that I was able to shift that, because I would have ended up in a very different place emotionally and financially. And so some of you listening today to this training program more than likely have your own stories from childhood, or maybe your teenage years, that have negatively affected you. They've ended up creating these limiting beliefs, which you've been carrying with you all these years. This first step of looking at problems shifting into power is really critical in learning to shift that problem away from that negative energy. So I want you to look at one of your stories. I want you to write it down. I want you to look at kind of that cause effect, and what are some of the causes? What are those triggers for you that trigger certain behaviors and emotions in your life? And then what are you missing out on because of that cycle that you're caught up into? Because you've been carrying it with you all these years, and it really needs to be released and redirected and refocused. So your choice today is to really honestly examine it and shift that energy into a different direction, because our next step is going to be, we're going to be talking about redirection. So we're kind of laying the foundation for that now. Don't let problems from your childhood control who and what you are as an adult. Today's a new beginning. You know, I see those misspelled words on the board in my mind in the classroom, and I really do wonder if they propelled me to create this drive and tenacity that allow me to do things that I don't think I ever could have done otherwise. So in a very shifting of energy, I look at that now and I actually get encouragement and power from those misspelt words, because it really literally was a focal point of changing who I was and how I looked at the world, and did create this unstoppable determination. So I want you to spend some time thinking about a childhood memory and really tear it apart and look at it honestly and see how it's affecting your life, and then see what you're missing and how you might be able to shift that a little bit.